Good morning and welcome to the Capital Gang. I am Oskar Ssemweya Musoke, and this morning it is quite exciting to see Opondo in the studio, looking quite youthful actually. You're most welcome to Gang. Oh.
Thank you. That's the beauty with the getting out of Kampala for a while.
Yes.
You're in Kapelebyong, you're in Muranda, you eat everything fresh. You don't have the stress of the jam in town. You spend 2 weeks without pulling out a coin from your pocket.
That is useful.
That's it, yeah.
And you're eating chicken that you have to chase and get.
Yes, in the course of chasing, it loses some calories. You also lose. Yeah.
Okay, that is interesting. Yeah. And welcome to Gang.
Thank you, Oskar.
Yes.
Good morning to our listeners. I'm back.
You're back indeed.
I'm back.
Then in the studio, I have our usual Derrick, Wandera, young journalist. You're most welcome to the Capital Gang, Derrick, once again.
Thank you, Oskar, and thank you to our viewers. Last time I saw Oo eating fresh fruits, and he was saying he just picks them from the tree direct. Please do not climb that tree yourself, because in as much as you're looking youthful,
I think he's past the age of climbing trees.
Yeah,
you may have a point.
You see, what I may be used to the indigenous pawpaw which grow tall. That one you have to climb. But these days we have what we call semi-dwarf. They hardly reach your shoulder. Yeah.
So you just pick by.
Yeah, just pick.
Okay. But even that one, the very tall, if you climb it, it's very risky because it is weak. The stem is weak.
Yeah. The pawpaw.
The pawpaw.
Climb the pawpaw tree.
Yeah. In the village, children between the age of 6 and 16 do climb. But I'm sure you are referring to the other person who climbed the mango tree. The NRM chairman.
Okay, I also have a guest in the house, Mr. John Kakungulu. Every time we are doing economic things, we invite him here, economist and executive director, Federation of Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises. You're most welcome to Gang as usual.
Thank you, Oskar. Good morning. So it's a pleasure to join you here to discuss the state of our economy.
Yes.
And tell them Kakungu has come with
files.
With the file. It is a ream of paper. The whole ream.
It's a budget speech. We don't want to misquote the minister.
Okay. Then we have Prosper Ahabwe, Associate Director and a Certified Public Accountant of Ernst & Young. You're most welcome to the Capital Gang, Prosper.
Thank you, Oskar. It's a pleasure to be here and gather with this team of people, very great people like Oo and Derrick and John, and I'm looking forward to the discussion that we'll have. And good morning.
Great to have you.
Yeah.
Let's start with the journalist, Derrick Wandera, to first give us some information, so to speak. What do we take? And I should say, gentlemen, Star Cafe goodies are here. They have missed Opondo, so for you, tuck in straight away. Be fearless. As you can see, OO has started. So, Derrick, you'll have to wait a little bit because you're going to give us information as a reporter, as a journalist. So put that hat on and tell us about the budget. What do we take out of the budget that was presented this week?
There's quite a lot to take from the budget, most especially the hits and misses. The priorities, the budgetary allocations, and where the common man really tags and tags in there. Of course, many have understood and welcomed the budget, probably because most of the things that we hear and see in the budget are the very things that have been spoken last year, this year, next year, or whichever year, and like expected. The sectors that have been taking the lion's share still retain the lion's share, the security, and of course transport and things like that. I saw many people asking the question around youth empowerment programs. I see PDM also coming up with 2.4 trillion. We also see that there are some roads that have been earmarked for maintenance or even development at that level and construction. Many would think actually many of our roads in the country need a touch or two. Many of our roads, especially the road that myself and OO use, needs a lot of renovation around Mavida and things like that. Wasn't captured in the budget, and many people are questioning some of those things. There's also the aspect of tackling corruption, especially when it comes to some of the most affected areas. When we saw the response funds, like response to calamities, or call them preparedness funds, where we saw the Mabati and all those things being misappropriated, but also interventions in areas like Karamoja and things like that. Those are things many people are questioning how they are being prioritized. But yeah, the budget was more or less what we've been hearing, and some of the misses are the ones that we so much expected. The health, I think the health sector budget was not given as much priority as it should. Education as well. The economists in this studio will help us try to realign those figures vis-a-vis what we have right now. But those are some of the things that came out from the budget. Yeah.
And overall.
Yeah, overall.
When you think of it's going to be 72
trillion.
Yes, yeah. Up from 52, 53.
52, 53. Yeah. Overall, one would actually expect that this is adding more than half of the previous budget to 72, and you expect that some of the priority areas and the things that touch the common person really stand out, and we hope that it comes out. The problem is, in most cases, some of these figures just end on paper, and many people miss them when it comes to the final beneficiaries, the final people who consume some of these services. We hope that with the increment of over 22 trillion, or 20 trillion actually, we hope that by the increment of that we can realize some more of the service delivery. Yeah.
Oh, where are we getting that 20 trillion from? The extra. Before, as you give your overview.
From the Ugandan economy. That's where we're going to get that money. From the people of Uganda, the producers in this economy. But Oskar, I noticed that we don't have MPs. Are they scared? Your rumors that they could be arrested.
I thought Kate should be here. Is he?
Why are they missing?
Is he coming?
No,
did you call him?
He's out of the country. He'll be back later this week.
Is he on the run?
You should have obtained and promised them immunity.
I mean, the best way to kill that rumor would be to appear on the show today.
Anyway, I think Oskar...
Since Nanfi is bringing rumors, I asked Katesh about the rumor, and he said, that's shame and natural. This is what happens as they are conducting their work.
I think the way we structure this debate about the budget these days isn't very useful for our listeners and the general public, because the budget actually is known well before the formal presentation in Parliament. And so I thought that it would be better to pick thematic areas and we focus on those and see whether those can make the changes that the broad population desires. But anyway, since you have picked that direction, I want to underscore that Uganda's economy has been steadily growing. Like the president, like the Minister for Finance, the Secretary, the Treasurer has variously been on different media. And this can be seen from basic things. If you travel around the country, you see that goods and services, for those of us who are a little older, you are Oskar, you and I, when we were leaving university, there were basic things that weren't available. Washing,
take us 50 years
yes. Washing soap wasn't available. Sugar wasn't available. Soda and beer wasn't available.
So can you compare yourself to the 12?
Roads were not available. You can heckle.
Let him.
That's why you will miss leadership and to play a critical role in the country. Roads weren't available. Today in the country, you can travel from end to end on the smooth road. Notwithstanding the potholes we are complaining about, the congestion we are complaining about in Kampala. But even that congestion, by the way, in Kampala points to increased productivity. The traffic you see, if you come from Barara side, you will see huge trucks bringing in goods or taking out goods. And so they congest the road. Others, if the economy was not functioning, those roads would be empty. The other area you could look at critical infrastructure like energy. Today, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, load shedding was the norm. Now, load shedding is rare. You go to the farthest part of the country, what you and I, who read literature, we used to call the back of beyond, and you find there is electricity there. There are miniature industrial outposts. You go to Kapelebyong, you go to Moroto, you go to Kisoro, you go to Budubuja, you will find some form of industrialization taking place. And to me, those are basic things that you see that actually the economy is growing. Where are the issues? I think that's where we could focus and say, does this budget speak to those issues? And then you look at the theme. I take from the theme, which broadly, to paraphrase, we want to focus on the 4 areas that the government thinks if we focus on them properly, fund them adequately, we should be able to see faster pace of transformation, of positive change in the country. Making agriculture where over 60% of Ugandans are, making agriculture productive, commercializing it, making industries productive, and particularly consuming local inputs, turning our local inputs into semi or finished products. The third area, which is tourism, with the stability in the country, stability in the region, stability in the continent, stability in the interconnectivity in the world. Tourism is now a big thing in the whole world. How do we make tourism in Uganda play a more critical role, leading role in bringing foreign exchange, in bringing money, but also employing people? If you go around the country today, the sense for me, I see domestic tourism alone is increasing. If you see the number of Ugandans who now leave their homes and go to eat, for example, in a restaurant and spending money is increasing. When you and I, when university and we are getting out, we would leave our workplaces and you go back to Bugorobi flats where you lived to eat lunch. These days, that's next to impossible because of the traffic in town and other things. But also the hotels are available. I remember I would go to Abdu Katuna at Kadaga and Company Advocates, and we would eat there in Voluga and Mboli. These days, we go and spend money somewhere else. If you see the number of Ugandans at the tourist sites, whether Kidepo, down Murchison, Elizabeth, Wind, and so on, the number of Ugandans who are touring their country, trying to find out, spending money, is increasing. In addition, obviously, to the foreign ones. And then the other area of the service industries, be financial or otherwise, increasing. So, is the government putting its resources where it thinks it will make a greater impact? In my view, yes. Where is the challenge? I think the challenge, which was not very highlighted in the budget, I think, in my view, are in three critical areas. I think we have too many square pegs in round holes in terms of placement of human resource. And consequently, policy formulation, policy shepherding, policy implementation, convergence is not realized quickly. And we have all complained about you have a good plan on the book, execution is poor, looks uncoordinated. It looks as an afterthought. If you look at the budgeting process, we budget, and then hardly 3 months, then somebody comes up with a supplement and you say, but we are just 3 months from what happened. You mean you did not think about this item and so on. Then I want to put it together as subterfuge. Things that you see are perhaps deliberate or out of incompetence, and you can add that to corruption, abuse, where you expect somebody to know, but they do things for other motives other than for the public good. And as a government or institutions of government, it seems to me we are either compromised or we are failing to decisively deal with the malaise that are visible. The third area is obviously the outright incompetence or lack of appropriate skills for the people who are administering public services. And so for me, I think if we put more focus there in the next 1 year, or particularly the next coming NDP, the next 5 years, we are making batteries here. I think we are now self-sufficient in the plastic, household plastic user items. We are actually exporting almost to the entire region, save maybe Kenya and so on. We did that for the steel groups, the people who are doing steel manufacturing and so on. As a result of that, today, I think we no longer import, maybe minimal, we will no longer import roofing sheets, finished, I mean. We import raw materials and we make here as a result of that intervention and many other interventions the government has made. I think what we need to do is how do we improve conducting due diligence to ensure that when we give private sector people money, we are able to follow and ensure that they do the things that the government gave them public resources for, and also remodify the process of accountability. Because once we give you public money, then I would expect that we should have a law or a policy. If we give a private person money, for example, if we give you 30% of what you need, surely that person should be able to come to a committee, before a committee of parliament, to answer questions, for accountability. We cannot give you public money and you avoid the parliament, or you avoid public scrutiny. I think there's something missing there. I blame the executive. Personally, I blame the executive. We should shepherd, we should lead there, but also the members of parliament who appropriate this money to these private entities. And somebody says, I can't come before parliament, but yesterday you gave them 50 billion, and so on and so forth. So for me, I think when we put those pay attention there, we should be able to see faster pace of improvement.
Welcome to Namfi, Marianne, Kasule, Nanfuka. Welcome to Gang.
And I'm glad to see my brother. I think he's not on the wanted list.
Good morning to our listeners.
Yes.
But have you seen his outfit? It's for wanted list.
Welcome, Honorable Abdu Kantuntu.
It looks like a giraffe, man.
Yes,
I do love
she does. So,
I'm about to
Mr. John Kakungulu Walugembe, to begin with, before Prosper comes on, avoided the first question I gave him, so you maybe can respond to it.
No, I take the direction of my boss with the political economy approach.
Okay.
Where are we getting from that?
Thank you. Because we've had several discussions on Gang about the budget. As you said, we have information. But to you, how are we going to raise that extra money from 52 trillion to 73 trillion? Yes, there's something like, is it 9 trillion to be borrowed? How will that then affect the economy?
Thank you. I'll start by just giving an overview, my understanding of what the budget was, and then I come to the question. The theme, just like last year, so the theme remained the same. Full monetization of Uganda's economy through commercial agriculture, industrialization, expanding and broadening services, digital transformation, and market access. Overall, the resource envelope, as you've mentioned, 72 trillion shillings, up from what was in the budget framework paper of 58.34 trillion. Now, of course, Minister started by giving a very rosy picture of how the economy is performing. He showed that GDP is now, our GDP is at is projected to grow by 6%. He indicated that the economy has fully recovered from COVID-19. He showed us that now our economy is worth 202 trillion shillings. He also showed, he also confirmed that there has been, so this growth, he said, has been pushed by growth in the services, agriculture, and industrial sectors, which have grown at 6.6, 5.1, and 5.8 respectively. He also congratulated government for the low inflation, also increased investment in oil and gas, increased exports, and the recovery of the tourism sector. In particular, the tourism sector, he showed that now we have tourism visits of close to 1.2 million, which is not far from the 1.5, which was the peak of tourism visits in around 2019. He also showed that private sector credit has grown to about 21 trillion from 20 trillion last year. I also showed that interest rates have reduced to 17.7, at least for shilling-denominated loans, from 19.3 last year. He also showed that we have grown.
Actually, when you say 19, it's like from 19 to 22%.
No, he's
the range. The private sector loans.
Yeah, this is what he is reporting.
Oh, okay.
That they have now reduced to 17.7.
You're not adding yours. Okay.
I can share my views later. External trade showed that we are doing well. We are improving. Our exports increased to about $7.4 billion US. And what is interesting is that we are exporting. Our exports to the Comesa region are almost matching our exports to the EAC region. That is very important because for a long time, most of our exports have been going to the East African region. So the fact that we are diversifying, for me, is a major thing. So 29% of our exports are going to the EAC, 29% are going to Comesa, the Middle East, and Asia. And you also mentioned some of the products where we are doing well: soap, cement, beer, and all these things. So, and then of course he talked about employment, he talked about foreign direct investment, and so on. Now, there's also the issue of sectoral allocation before I come to how we are going to raise the money. The most of the money is going towards human capital development, namely education and health, 10 trillion. We are allocating about 9 trillion to security and governance. But the key thing under that is all security personnel below the rank of captain are going to get a 25% salary raise, which I think is a good thing from a demand perspective. Roads, they are putting about 4.9 trillion. Wealth creation initiatives, they are putting about 2.6. Electricity, they are putting about 982 billion, and agriculture is getting about 1.8 trillion. Now, how are we going to finance the budget? Government thinks that they'll raise 31 trillion through domestic revenue mobilization, and I think that is fair because this year they've collected 27. The target is about 29. Good enough, the financial has not ended, so there's actually a possibility that they might hit the target if everything goes well. Then, of course, the other is through domestic borrowing. They'll get about 8.9 trillion domestically. Then they'll do a rollover.
Mr. Walugembe, I like your optimism. So the target was not 29 trillion. The target was about 31 trillion. And is it 2 weeks left?
No, for last year it was 29. They've collected 27. This year the target is now 31. So we hope if they are able to hit the 29 this year,
24 is 31.
Yeah. So
and how much is collected so far?
About 27. So there's still a shortfall.
In the 2 weeks, or you think they'll collect the balance?
I mean, we should always have hope. So the issue now within that, I think they've brought some interesting tax measures. They put 100 shillings on petrol, 100 shillings on diesel. They've increased the excise duty on imported wines, which we strongly support to support the growth of the local sector. They've put some excise duty on powdered beer and so on. They've also exempted manufacturers of electric vehicles and equipment and so on. Now, so in a nutshell, we are going to borrow more. About the bulk of the money is going to be financed through borrowing. And so our concern is that our public debt stock is growing. The Auditor General showed that by October last year it was about 93 trillion. So if we continue on this trajectory, there is a risk of debt distress and even the default. And other countries like Ghana, Kenya, Zambia have really come close to that. So my biggest concern would be the issue of debt. The second would be how this extra 14 trillion was, was incorporated in the budget. The Public Finance Management Act states how the budgeting process is supposed to proceed. Of course, government has the leeway to bring corrigenda, but our understanding is that you bring corrigenda for small amounts. 1 trillion, not something you might have forgotten, but offloading 14 trillion into the budget at the last minute, for me, I thought it was a bit messy. They could have gone about it another way. So for me, that is definitely a concern with regard to how that was managed. On the side of businesses, there has been a general view. Businesses feel that the tax regime is too restrictive. There's paying too many taxes. So they are not being given the breathing space to grow and to succeed, and that informs some of the rumblings we had with the IFRIS system and the VAT regime and so on. It's true there are some businesses that do not want to pay tax and have not been paying tax, but what we also want is a tax regime that allows businesses to actually grow and thrive. If you're taxing the businesses too much and they are closing and so on and so forth, then you're shooting yourself in the foot. It means next year and the other year you won't collect sufficient revenue, then you'll have to borrow more and more and more and more. So I think part of the strategy that we have to adopt is how do we give businesses room to grow and to succeed so that in future, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, they can be able to contribute to this resource envelope. And then the other issue that's also critical is where do we borrow from? The challenge we have with government is that they are increasingly borrowing from non-concessional sources, borrowing from commercial banks and so on. If you borrow 8.9 trillion from local commercial banks, what are you doing? You're disincentivizing financial institutions to lend to SMEs and the private sector. They would rather lend to government. Instead of lending to 10,000 SMEs, 10% of whom might disappear, I'm better off lending to government because I'm sure government will pay.
Abdu has been saying that all the time.
That distortionary impact of domestic borrowing, I think, is something that we need to moderate going forward.
Thank you. Prosper, over to you. A listener told me that when I said Ernest and Young, how come Prosper did not say Ernst?
He has a right.
How come that was one listener, then the other one? I beg your pardon?
I asked him prosper where we are prospering.
Yes. Yeah. Then there's another one. Ask who is that taking tea like Mzee takes porridge on the COVID, and I said
in a yellow cup.
I think it's everyone around who's taking tea. So.
But I said let them enjoy Star Cafe goodies, so it's okay. So, what's your take on Mr. Walugembe here? He's very positive. I'm quite surprised. He actually thinks you are going to find the 72 trillion. Are you in the same category to begin with?
Thank you, Oskar, and everybody. I think I align so much with the comment that John has given. And as you'd see, when you think about the funding of the budget, 72 trillion, which is largely just about 44-45% of it is the 31 trillion domestically funded. And there you're looking at tax and non-tax revenue. Tax revenue looking at 29 trillion already, based on the previous year. The minister mentioned that 1.9 trillion of the previous year's target of 29.9 will not be achieved, or is likely not to be achieved. So you look at that vis-a-vis, now we're projecting another 29, that will URA achieve that in the next financial year, 2024-25, and you could say yes, based on the projections of growth, there is optimism that the economy will grow around 6.4% in terms of GDP growth, which is a good thing, and so that gives you a capacity to collect more. So from a domestic resource mobilization perspective, the growth in GDP provides that opportunity. But then you go on to the other side of it, which is heavily sitting around borrowing and debt. And we're borrowing a lot domestically, and also there is external borrowing as well, which we're doing. And the direction that we've seen in this budget around borrowing is that government is increasing its domestic financing compared to previous year by around 164%, from about 3.3 trillion to the 8.9 trillion. That creates indeed a crowding out effect, or potential crowding out effect, where the businesses may be crowded out because the banks are more willing to lend to government than they are willing to lend to you and me, who are perceived to be higher risk.
Yes. John has stated that.
Yes. Then there is also, of course, this increasing refinancing that we see here. And here you're rolling over debt. And we're moving from 8.3 trillion in 2023-24 to 12 trillion. That is 44% increase. That, I think, is speaking to the downgrading of our credit rating as a nation to that moderate risk of debt distress. So we need to be more cautious this time around how much debt we are increasing. And from an expenditure perspective, the amount of debt servicing costs, the minister spoke about 33%, is what is contributing in the 72 trillion. There's debt servicing cost of about that for prior year, and it's likely to increase to about 40. So it tells you as a percent of our domestic revenue, that is a big amount. So whatever we are mobilizing from domestically is about 34% is going or has to go into debt servicing. So going forward, we need to minimize or be more efficient as we on what we have borrowed. One, I would advise that we put the money to productive areas and areas that are going to spur development and growth, more of the development budget areas, but also how the money is used is also another critical area. And we've heard a lot about corruption and money going into that. The IGG report had about 10 trillion. We're losing 10 trillion between Jan 2022 and December 23 as a country to corruption, and this is a big area. So spending and where we put that money must be really, really in efficient areas. And generally, we also know that from a funding perspective, we have a risk on funding in terms of the decline in grants. When we passed a law that didn't make certain partners happy, funding declined in terms of grants. So this means there's a lot more pressure that's going to be on URA to collect in the next financial year. And there are measures, the tax measures that have been put in place. I think he's spoken to some of them. But we have, on that area, I want to think that we need to harmonize our tax policy with development and growth and how we want to encourage the businesses to grow. And case in point really is if the powdered beer, the minister mentioned that there's putting 1,000 shillings per kg as excise duty on that. To the best of my knowledge, this is a new product coming into the market. It's being piloted, and if you go into tax a product that is just coming into the market, you run the risk of discouraging investment. That product is made up from sorghum and wheat, which is locally and
on this table, I know it's O&I that exercise that activity, but I'd never come across powdered beer.
Yeah.
So now if you add a tax on it, I may not find it at all.
I'm just talking about it being a new thing, a new product, and it needs time to grow. But if we come in to tax it immediately, you're likely to kill the whole value chain for it, and yet it's supporting our agriculture sector, which actually is the backbone of this economy and employs about 68% of the people of the population. So let's harmonize tax policy to drive growth in the economy. Thank you.
Nanfi, we come to you. I'll not ask you about whether we shall raise the income. What I'll ask you is, has... I beg your pardon?
Happy that Nanfi is back. I'm surprised.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Many are pleased, yes. Nanfi, as he has said, he has to follow his boss's line. But he said, the boss said the economy is doing very well. We're a powerhouse. We will grow 6.5%, even though others are not. And then has touched on the investment in those private sector investments and how they can work if they appoint different people. Have a gem, so they're saying, look at the ministers and see if they've been appointed to be in the right place. But can we get that growth? The president praised the Minister of Finance about.
Or is that hype man of the losing team? But he insists. No, he has, and these days he actually makes sense. So I guess, but I'm hoping he says these things in the NRM meetings. I don't want them to stop on radio.
Start with the question I've asked you. It's a good way to start your comments on the budget. Shall we attain 6.5% growth?
Who is it that traveled abroad and brought back a book about lying by numbers?
Abdu.
Oh, okay. Did he give it to OO and other government officials? Because
I'm ready to hand it to Moses.
He actually gave it to me.
Oh, and this is why you're speaking better. Abdu, thank you. Because Oskar, we can't just be sprouting numbers, and every day I get more disappointed in my friend Ramadan, who wrote books about economics that works. When you look at this budget, what works in this madness? This is like after listening to it and reading about it, I called it the Slay Queen budget. You know how a Slay Queen has an iPhone, but doesn't have where to sleep, but has an iPhone. This budget reads like that. I mean, you could not even collect your last year's revenue, meet your last year's revenue targets. You're struggling, and then you just almost double your expenses. Who does that? And we've been going on and on and on for the last couple of years about cut the spending. And even the minister talked about it. And yet in the budget, he's showing us nothing of this cutting the spending. We go ahead and generate new expenditures. And I think it's Ramadan himself who was calling it budget games. We've gotten to a point, Oskar, where in Parliament, and all of you have seen the images coming on our televisions this week about MPs on the budget committee and the whole budget committee fiasco that has gotten some of them arrested. And I think that 3 is just even a small number. They're just getting the small fish. Many people in the ministries, in these in the different organizations in Parliament are complicit in this. They go ahead and push for an agenda in the budget, knowing well that we cannot afford it, and yet because there is a personal gain for them, because if I get Yukira Motors this amount of money, there is a kickback of this amount of money. So we are in a situation where the people supposed to budget for us cannot think straight. They cannot think for the country because they are busy thinking, if I get more money for Parliament, then I get this amount of kickbacks. If I get more money for the banana, whatever. Because I've even seen expenditure in the space program. Did the Japanese chase us from that space program? Have we been reinstated because they threw our shuttle out of their orbit? And yet we are budgeting another 3.3 billion for the space program, which we queried in the first place of, do we need it? What is it for? So for me, Oskar, and like you mentioned earlier, I think it was Ofwono who said, which on programs like this, we shouldn't do it on the budget day. We should actually do it from when the budgeting is going to be done, and then we can discuss sector by sector. What do we do? How do we do this? But because the whole procedure is mangled by the policymakers, the budgeters, and the implementers, it's very hard to even have a discussion about these expenditures before they are read to us. And I think most Ugandans, this resonates with most Ugandans because no one even tunes in to listen to these things anymore, because it no longer makes sense to an ordinary Ugandan. And you can talk about growth and the numbers, and they may look good on paper, but does it translate to the ordinary Ugandan? Is Oskar happy with the budgeting for schools? Is he happy with the taxes that he's paying? Is he happy the taxes are going where they're supposed to go? Because trust me, three months down the road, we are going to have new budget supplements of classified budgets, budget expenditures, in addition to this 70 plus trillion that we can hardly afford. Because even when you see the breakdown of where we are getting from the money, a lot of it is borrowing. And already we are stretched with debt. Now that brings our debt to GDP ratio to 40.3%. The ideal is 20.
Way higher.
It's way higher than that.
Says it's 47.
It's 47.
My view is that it's in the 50s.
Exactly, because they always lie by numbers. But even when you take their own figure, it's ridiculous, because it's a healthy one should be projected at 20%. But when you see where we are, and yet we are doing nothing to curtail this debt. Why? Because we have to pay clothes for the speaker. You understand? These are the expenditures that we have in our budget. We have to buy for the speaker and deputy speaker cars worth 2 billion shillings. Every minister who comes in has to have a new penkoni, regardless of whether the old one is still functioning. We have to, service a parliament and RDCs and deputy RDCs and the director media center and his assistant and his deputy and assistant RDCs and assistants of assistants. So where does this stop, Oskar? These are the discussions we should be having. No, I would like to come here and have a healthy discussion about the oil revenues that we've projected. And, we start, breaking them down on what can it do for Ugandans. But then when you're faced with a budget that looks like this, you can't help but just to, again, whine and complain. And the worst part is that no one is even listening. Because where is the sense in you borrowing money so that once again you give it to coffee testers after we've seen what the coffee testers have done with the last money that they had? And Ofwono makes a valid point. Do we hold these companies that we give money in the private sector accountable? Or some of them just come and say, oh, well, it failed. Because these people, the moment they get money, what happened to the $18 million? They sat in a room, divided it among themselves, and say, you get this, and everyone runs away. And at the end of the day, yes, these are Ugandans, but what did they do with the money? Did they even do anything that developed the country? Because in a third world country, you would like a budget that spurs development. And as much as we continue saying development and we are developing and developing, the revenue numbers will tell you that that's not the case. Even their own projections tell a different story. So what do you resort to? You resort to borrowing. If anyone in MTN came up with this budget for MTN, they would be thrown out of their job. Their chief finance officer would be thrown out for having such a ridiculous budget. And this is what happens when you employ T-girls and drivers as ministers. Because at the end of the day, they're going to come up with things that don't even make sense to them. Because these are people who are not as educated or as competent to run a country, let alone a border stage. So you're giving them the task of then budgeting for a whole country. It will not even make sense to them. So no, Oskar, we are not going to get the money. Yes, we are going to borrow again, and we are going to strengthen the noose around our children's necks because we are going to leave them a country that is steeped deep in debt.
Okay.
And this time around, there's not going to be debt cancellation concerts by Bono and those musicians, because this is money we are borrowing from commercial banks. You're not going to sing for Stanbic to write off our debts. No, we are going to be stuck with them, and so will our children and our grandchildren.
So, Abdu, both Nanfi and OO have been a little bit unfair to us here on the discussions we've had. So I've gone back in the record and seen that we also discussed Ssemweya's minority report, where he detailed the excesses and even compared things like highlight of a 72 trillion budget versus 52 trillion, and then things he suggested to be removed from the budget, including advertising and public relations and so on. And
trips abroad.
Well, yes, quite trips abroad, 114 billion, travel inland as well. 712 billion.
So that Abdu doesn't bring me nice shirts.
And another book online by numbers.
So Abdu, the discussion has been had. And yet, from what last time we had a discussion here, even the 72 trillion was a surprise to some members of parliament. Is that not correct?
It's madness.
Well, for those who don't do their job, it was a surprise. But for us who do our job and read, it wasn't.
There was an allegation that said that when the budget itself was brought, it wasn't 72, but you, the MPs, increased it by adding in.
But that's our job. It was, yes. You see what happens? A budget process. First of all, I would like to disagree with Nanfi. He thinks that this budget has just been ready now and people are discussing it. This process has since then changed. The whole year when they are in these budget processes, sectoral committees are meeting different MDGs and discussing their work plans and their budgets. A whole year. However, sometimes you expect people to follow these discussions and they don't. They wait at the end, and that's when they come in and give all sorts of comments and so on. But this process has been for the whole year, and publicly. Publicly.
I think you're right. Ssemweya has written a full paper.
Yes, so it's not correct that people come at the last minute and they start discussing the budget.
Don't address Nanfi alone. It's Nanfi and OO.
And I said people. I didn't even talk about nothing.
But they are here.
So that is one. Number two, you see, once you initiate this process by the BFP, that's the framework paper, it goes to Parliament. And different sectoral committees start looking at the priorities and the work plans and the MTF being given to those particular sectors.
MTF is?
The place for that.
Okay, the ceilings.
Okay. You know, this is a morning show on a Saturday.
Okay.
Yes.
The ceilings, which have been given by the Minister of Finance, the people who are in charge of the Treasury.
The ceiling of the house.
Go on, Abdu.
So once you do that, then we make adjustments in priorities where we think that maybe government is not getting its priorities correct. They are what we call unfunded priorities, and we make suggestions in reports, and those reports go back to finance. Then finance comes back with the budget. Actually, when you look at the committee reports, the suggestion would add almost 100 trillion. Because one, the people making the reports are not professionals. They are just like, in my district, this road is bad. In my district, this school is this. In my hospital, this, blah, blah, and so on. So, but government looks at those suggestions that have been made by different sectoral committees and adjusts accordingly. So that's how they adjusted to the 72 trillion. So it is not true that this thing just came as a surprise, except for the person who didn't follow the processes. Having said that, we'll go to the budget itself. It's quite ambitious. There is no doubt about it. Very, very ambitious. And really, it is a well-written document if you look at it. The priorities on paper have been properly identified. You can see them. Whether you're talking about agro-industrialization, you're talking about tourism, you're talking about ICT, you're talking about peace and security. These should be the real priorities, the anchors of development. So, looking at this budget, I am telling you, priorities are correct. However, what are the challenges? As the day follows night, I repeat, as the day follows night, you are going to have this animal called the budget cuts. Because that's what has been happening throughout. So don't even think that what has been presented in this beautiful paper is what is going to happen. No way. Even this current budget, which was 53?
52
trillion,
53.
Around 53 trillion. We had budget cuts. And once you have budget cuts, there is no money. Priorities have changed. But at the same time, you disorganize work plans of different MDGs. Because all of them do their plans according to what you have provided. And then you unilaterally cut them. You don't go to Parliament to say we have changed the plans, neither do you go even to individual ministries. Now, Ramadan gets his knife and starts chopping. You get so don't worry about some of these things that it is ambitious. It will not happen because there will be no money anyway.
Yeah,
you get it.
The worst part about that is then they prioritize the clothes and donations and classified budgets of State House and leave out something like health and agriculture and other areas, exactly, irrigation and other areas that are useful to the country. Because all these useless ventures that we go into and MPs travels, they always have money. MPs, commissioners, rewards, they always have money for that. But they won't have the money for Nakaseke Hospital.
There is a certain section which Nanfi speaks to who get excited by that sort of language. I don't have to go walk that path. Let me go.
No, but it's true.
Let me go back to the figures. So, Oskar, one, there should be concerns about our borrowing. It's a legitimate concern. And the minister says, yes, it is high, but it is sustainable. I don't think it is sustainable. And what is the remedy or what is the cure? We must cut our expenditure and then invest the little we have in the areas that can generate more revenue for the country. And let me tell you, you can do all roads for political purposes. You do a road from Mulanda to Idudi because you want to
get the vote.
You want to get the vote and please people. But it will not spur that growth you are talking about. It will not create, including, because it's so populist. You've done all the roads, but what roads have you done? And how much are those roads contributing to the economic development of the country? For example, as we talk now, this economy is basically Kampala-based. Kampala-based. But let us look at the time you take. I came in late because of traffic jam and so on. Why don't we sort out some of that? Because it has got a direct impact on the economy. You take Mr. Kakungulu here 1.5 hours to leave his house and do 8 kilometers
for a business appointment.
Man hours of working have been cut. Why? Somebody is on the road. Even a meeting, gas that is hazardous to the environment and so on. So what we have to do, Oskar, we need to cut our expenditure to areas that can really promote growth. And this we speak to person like Ramadan. Then, it's the subject I like most. You can't resort to domestic borrowing to these levels. In economics, I really don't know. I am a self-educated economist, but there are these guys who read it and taught by the biggest professors. Ask Oskar yourself, who will lend an Ofwono money when there is a what? Because there is a government such nobody. So you affect people to affect businesses or people who will be doing businesses, creating more jobs, paying taxes. They can't afford credit, and instead you are telling them, okay, government will give you money. I don't think it works that way. Let us look at the money we put.
First pause. I want us to stop for a break. Kahunga, our usual listener, says, is it possible to get gangsters to innovate ways to fit in a budget in our means of 32 trillion? And I'd say impossible.
It's very easy.
But Abdu, even when I'm borrowing, if I had a sister who had that money, I would borrow from her instead of borrowing from a bank that will charge me 21% interest.
That's for sure.
The Capital Gang on Capital FM with Uganda Martyrs University in Kozi. Capital FM's Capital Gang in association with Uganda Martyrs University in Kozi, making a difference.
This is the Capital Gang. Welcome back from the break. It's a good time to mention Uganda Matters University is seeking applicants for undergraduate and postgraduate programs for the academic year 2024-2025. Applicants must have a degree in a relevant area from a recognized university and a minimum of 2 principal passes. Visit their campuses at Nkozi, Lubaga, Fort Portal, Masaka, Mbale, and Kampala, or you could call them. Uganda Matters University, where knowledge meets opportunity. So, Abdu, now you sit in this presentation of 72 trillion. All, say, 400 of you that are seated in there with the president.
Actually, it is 500.
No, some did not attend.
529.
Yes.
529 MPs.
But some did not attend.
Heads.
I think only about 3 opposition MPs defied their leader and attended.
No. You see, that's just the presentation.
I'm talking about the presentation.
By the consideration and passage of the budget, the 529 were there.
And you see, I don't like that DC because all my colleagues, including those of the opposition, have been active participants throughout the whole process.
Yes. So as you sit,
including their signature to the sectoral committee reports.
So Abdu, as you sit in there, and pass, Nanfi did say something about private sector. As you sit in there, you know very well that this budget of 72 trillion.
No. You need to get somebody of Ofwono investment who will say, okay, I have this 100 billion. Where am I going to invest? And he manages it as a businessman and professionally. He will create for you sustainable jobs, real sustainable jobs. Because one, there is no populism to a businessman. You either work or you are sacked. If you put up a good industry, you employ your accountants, you employ transporters and so on, including, you know, the girls doing this, the boys doing this. Those are the only sustainable jobs we need. Not like we gave a few people, villagers, you get this money. That doesn't work, in my view. But in economics terms, you increase some liquidity amongst the population. So, Oskar, one, I think governments, there are areas, for example, when they are investing in Chira Motors, I don't have any problem with it. Unfortunately, we don't have a clear policy, public, transparent policy on how government can make interventions and avail funds to private investors.
And accountability.
And because you see, if you have a transparent process, then there will be an accountability process within. Because now, whoever knocks at Plot 1 Uganda is the one who gets the money. And for you to go there, you must know Nanfuka to take you there. And that is not correct. I think government should come with a clear policy. So look here, these are the qualifications for people who may access this sort of money. And this year, we are providing this sort of money for access. Then we all know, as taxpayers, that this year you have 150 billion within the Ministry of Finance for this purpose. And this is how it is accessed. And the Ofwono from Mulanda, if he has this innovative idea, may go and say, look, I need this money because this is my proposal. We don't have it. And once you don't have that, then all sorts of allegations come in. When you look at energy, I think it's a real priority because now there's nothing we can do without energy. But we've really invested in energy growth. And when you, next year they're providing another 980 billion, close to $1 trillion, what? Close to $1 trillion shillings within the energy sector. Whether we'll get this money and invest, I'm not so sure. We are
says he's not been experiencing load shedding, but in Chigo we have load shedding quite regular on Entebbe Road.
Yeah, but let me tell you, we are far better than we were many years ago.
That is true.
That's for sure.
Thank you, Abdu.
That is true.
Far better. And let me tell you, I don't know whether you guys have traveled to South Africa. I travel to South Africa quite regularly to attend the Pan-African Parliament. But I can tell you one, South Africa now is where we were many years ago. You can't believe it. An economy like South Africa to have this constant load shedding and so on. So really, on this sector, we needed to, we don't have to chase some, but we need to congratulate ourselves.
Okay. And to go back to these gentlemen we invited let me start with Prosper here, Abdu, and Ofwono put it in a very diplomatic manner. He said we need to have the right people in the right places. Now everyone is... No,
I said there are too many square pegs in round holes.
Well, there, yeah. Same, yeah.
But I don't...
I have another message saying to Nanfuka,
Oskar, I don't agree with the meaning professions, and they say triggers, because even a toilet cleaner, Nanfi, you will not clean your own toilet. But also, in our type of economy, and the world over, people may do lower jobs for different reasons. But also, we should not condemn to remain there as triggers. Triggers, drivers can progressively attain the requisite competencies.
I'm an example here. For another dim. I'm an example. You can always quote me. I have ever been a school cleaner.
The speaker said she was a house girl.
as Abdu says, that will be for another day. Now, Prosper,
Yes.
so here we are, and the other question I'll put to Wandera here, he might as well get ready. There's the coffee man. I've been trying to invite him. I haven't found him yet. Nelson Tugume, who maybe will come here, not to Parliament. And the other day I saw you saying he started his businesses without any money. But that's for Wandera to respond to. But these ones, you people, you are the ones in audit. TriStar Apparels, 10 million. These are allegations on Twitter. Hides and Skins got 150 billion. TriStar was $10 million. Atiak Sugar 170 billion. Rocco 200 billion. Banana PBIT 240. It goes on. The coffee consortium we've discussed here. Loboa Hospital we've discussed severally. It goes on. Aya Hotels, now they might get some more money if it is bought out. I don't know who would run it. When do we have audits of these donations? And how do they affect the budget?
Thank you for that question. And I think the government has a number of arms that are dealing with this issue of governance and how an accountability, to ensure there's accountability. Yeah, we know there's the IGG, there's the Auditor General, even Parliament has COSASE and has the PAC. So accountability is an important area that we have to focus on as a country, and to ensure that we actually have value.
I don't think
money.
they would make it to COSASE. Abdu will guide.
But these are public funds that are going to causes, and those causes have to be worthwhile causes and have to be evaluated in terms of whether they are returning the right, output for the country. The intentions, I think, are good. If you're investing in, say, Atiak Sugar and in the Atiak factory and, say, Hides and Skins and things like that, the intentions are good. But the question is whether those, where they are just donations, that's where you have to check. And I think government is trying to ensure that strategically those sectors don't go down, because there is employment that is provided by these factories which benefit others. There are also ripple effects in terms of the farmers and the agriculture sector that benefits from them. So if you allow them to crash, you may end up missing out on the ripple effect benefits and the employment that is creating down the value chain.
But the economics of it is that you call them too big to fail.
Exactly.
That should be
Go to the micro.
That should be too big to fail. That like what happened with the motor industry in the US when they came in and government came in for a bailout, because the collapse of the motor industry at that time in the US would have had bad effects on the whole economy.
And if Aya collapses now today,
that's the question we should be asking.
Exactly.
If Aya collapse, is it too big to fail, or it is just too small it should fail?
Just as a rider, I think we have made a shift, particularly the president, because you remember 1992, 93, 94, when commercial banks in Uganda were failing. The president's position at that time was, if those banks are dead bodies, allow them, let us bury them. And many of them were buried. Those commercial banks, remember Tefe, Nile, Ssemweya, and others. I don't know, I don't appreciate why he has now said a man like Aya, if he's a man or a woman, if he fails, it is fatal.
Or both.
It would be fatal. But I think that hotel can be sold out, and whoever wants to buy as a junk can buy it. Uganda's economy wouldn't be. So but I still blame both the executive and the parliament, because parliament should be able to say, let us list enterprises that we should not allow to fail under any circumstance. And we all agree on that. And then in that one we say, Mr. Government, make sure you fund these ones appropriately and in time.
Finish off, Prosper, because I want to get from John as well and Derrick. Go on.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think yeah, there must be some sort of criteria that government should put in place to evaluate the impact of a business failing, and then coming to intervene into it and provide that support.
Yeah.
That is really what is missing, and it's something that I agree with we need to do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And for you, John, Kakungulu, Walugembe, are you the people that cause us all these problems? Because as Executive Director, Federation of Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises, you are the begging people who keep saying, "No, I want to start this," or "My group wants to start," and then you get these handouts. Is that
you remember South Sudan? These were the guys.
The pressure we had, all of them lobbying. South Sudan? And you see, that's where the problem is, Oskar.
Yeah.
That you've got people like them. Once the business fails, they say, "You give us money, our business has failed." They don't even do a self-re-examination and say, "Look, why did our business fail?"
They married the second.
And I don't think Uganda is at that point.
Go on, John.
Okay, I have very strong views on how our money is deployed, and I'll start by touching an area that I think is growing. There's an area of bailouts. There's an area of science and technology where people are hiding to push. Because I'm a scientist myself, so we are not anti-scientists or whatever, but we must have a clear scheme of supporting scientists. If you say you have an anti-tick vaccine, excellent. Let others with similar ideas come and compete fair and square, so that when we are giving you money here, that we are giving you 50 billion for your excellent anti-tick vaccine, we all agree that there is evidence, it is published, it is credible, and so on. If you saying I'm setting
like
up a vaccine,
Professor, what's his name? Professor Ogwan?
If you come,
you know what? But just because of going to Kapelebyong, Ogwang is instead building a huge mansion in a remote Kapelebyong.
He made a lot of money during COVID, so his huge mansion.
Yeah, go on, John.
Yeah.
no, it's fine.
But do you want to stop people from building houses or really?
I'm not.
Especially one who is in the private sector. Actually, we saw him making the money.
But we don't have to be jealous of rich people. It doesn't work that way.
But John, you're the one on
That's
the
true.
microphone.
Okay, so my view is the first group.
Yeah, go on.
The first group where I think we are spending money in a very unclear way is this issue of science and technology. Because in this budget for science, unlike any other sector or program, here they are actually allocating money and they are touching people's names. They are touching people's names. So you have this day biopharma who is getting 723 billion to build. They are saying they are going to create 10,000 jobs for science professionals. How do you create 10,000 jobs for science professionals in this country? So they are saying they are going to create cancer drugs, human vaccines. This will take forever. If you know the way the pharmaceutical industry works, you wouldn't believe this. Second, this anti-tick project. Anti-tick project is good, but what we are saying, let it come through a competitive process. Let us know that this call was put out, this research was the best, therefore as a country, because it's the best, we should finance it. Then if you're saying and then someone is saying they're doing human vaccines, for what? 25 billion. Put a name here, Professor X getting 25.24 billion for human vaccines, for what? Most vaccines are already there anyway, and a small country like Uganda, which is a small price taker in economics, is not going to compete in the pharmaceutical industry effectively. We just cannot.
Prioritization, that's what you're saying.
That now brings me to the issue of bailouts. It brings me to the issue of bailouts. If someone is unable to run their business due to poor governance practices or whatever, someone goes and borrows. In fact, we have a tendency now of seemingly successful Ugandan entrepreneurs going out of the country borrowing and either refusing to borrow or defaulting and then asking government to pay on their behalf. Now, this gentleman over here goes to an Industrial Development Corporation in South Africa, borrows $67 million, fails to pay. Now he's $624 billion. Mind you, he got the land for free. Now he's asking us to pay. So this chap, is he an investor? Is he a speculator? What did he bring on the table? Because we want investors who are able to bring finance. You are an investor, you either bring finance. If SMEs fail, people say, no, you people, you don't keep records, you're not serious, you are informal. If this chap is unable to pay and is unable, either is not keeping books or what, let him go the fate of the SME way. All of us, businesses collapse and we come. Finally, I am proposing, let us set up a national bailout policy and investment scheme or whatever. If we have money and we believe we need to support great ideas, let all of us compete. If we are saying Uganda needs to take vaccine, let Walugembe also go back and get his scientific notes and make proposals. If I fail, it's fine. It's fair and square. But for someone to just get 50 billion and we don't know to what extent their research is, you just say human vaccine. For what? So this, in my view, and then finally, it's this coffee thing as well. We are allocating 75 billion to coffee. People are setting roasteries, freeze dry, and so on. Look, if you're an investor, bring something on that table. If you're using government money, if you don't have any experience in the coffee sector, because most of these people, if we are to look at the experience in the coffee sector, the most experienced investors in the coffee sector have been left aside, and then we brought novices, and these novices have been given money, and we think they are going to make miracles for us. How? So for me, I think this area of bailout, investment, and science, we need to interrogate. Thank you.
Derrick, in some ways, John Walugembe has tackled a bit of what I'd put to you already. But Serious Black on X, formerly Twitter, says the chest thumping on electricity supply by Kantuntu needs to stop, considering only 20% of the population has access to electricity. It should resume once electricity is at 90% with no load shedding. Another one, James in Ginger, is saying Kantuntu is lamenting about stuck in brackets vehicle traffic jams, but by not listening to or dismissing what Nafi is saying about prioritization, he is putting the listeners in a verbal traffic jam, since he is saying exactly what he dismissed from Nafi's contribution. Derrick is on microphone.
Oskar, you had put to me the question of coffee, and I think it has been quite explicitly put out there. When you allocate 75 billion to coffee, with tagging certain factories or industries, and of course those come with particular names of people who own those factories. In the recent past, I think in about 4 or 5 months, there has been a very fierce fight about tea, and I think late last year there was a very fierce fight about coffee. Who should get who should be prioritized in terms of value addition, because government is talking so much about value addition and hoping to increase the volumes of refined coffee from the country. But then talking about that, the question has always been who should be prioritized in this and what's the criteria. I think what we've been speaking so much about. I want to give you an example of Rwanda. Rwanda's projected GDP, national budget for the next financial year is $4.4 billion US. It is the smallest actually in the region. The smallest, probably it's not even 20% of Uganda, which is 19%. Second to Kenya, which is 31 billion USD. And Tanzania is 18.9. But when you look at the allocation of resources and who gains from it. For instance, the tourism sector in Kenya, I mean in Rwanda, very deliberate that there has to be something seen in terms of development, that if there is any economic activity that is prioritized by government, you will see a semblance of a person who has been given very frugal, very qualified, and ticks all boxes of getting the money. And one would actually think that there's a lot of thinking that's put in who takes precedent in terms of getting some of these investment policies or investment in Rwanda. And you can see even on the picture of the road sector in Rwanda. I've been to Rwanda, and you will sleep off when you are on their roads. Very small economy, very small. It's not even like half of ours here, but there's a semblance of prioritization and frugality when it comes to allocating these investments to people. Here in Uganda, it's who is closer to those that allocate these resources.
Who has Katuntu's number?
Who has Katuntu's number, for instance?
Opondo's number.
Or Opono's number. If you have Opono's number, you might. But who has?
I have ever used Opondo's number. It works.
So you got some of it.
Not see? Money, but I
so I am saying
I got the help.
So it's very different from
meritocracy zero.
Yeah. For instance, in Kenya, there's a lot of corruption in Kenya, maybe even more than that is in Uganda. But there's that frugality, there's that respect that's given to allocation of resources and
a will to get things done.
Or the will to get things done. Here in Uganda, we shall allocate money to someone to go and construct a road somewhere. They fail completely, and then we give them more contracts to go and construct a hospital. It fails, then we give them more money to go and put up a refinery of coffee. They fail, and it's going to continue that way. And then the question is, who is fooling who?
Okay, let me give you a bottle of water, Derrick, Wandera, and the rest we shall bring in a conclusion. I'll go to Parliament. You know, in Uganda, Nanfi, they say bino obyayagala. So they. I'm not
the direction of Nanfi. That I just kwagala bintu no. We must have substance.
Okay, let's hear the substance. So, ED of Uganda Media Center, we have 3 MPs charged in court. One failed to get bail because, the surety is one of them and so on. I think there was another one that got bail, but he was kidnapped in a manner not very different from his fly-kicking people. If it was an official arrest. So, as now speaking officially,
did you say the comments on the budget will come later?
In conclusion mode. Okay. When you are concluding, put them in.
First of all, this is the second time or the third time during the State of the Nation address that the President was saying that he was receiving information about racketeering between the Minister of Finance and Parliament. If accounting officers, the finance, accounting officers, and Parliament. He first made this when the late Muhakanizi was still Secretary of the Treasury. My reading was that reshuffle he made of PSs to remove Muhakanizi and many others, you remember a number of permanent secretaries were removed. And actually, he said, in public interest. I don't want to mention their names. Later on, many of them made appeals, and the one of public interest were removed. And they were retired honorably. Because when you are retired in public interest, chances, I think, you don't qualify for terminal benefits and things like that. But this time he comes around and says he has evidence, and in under a week, the MPs are arrested.
Charged.
And charged. I was a parliamentary reporter 30 years ago when it was NRSC and a little of the 6th Parliament. Well,
your microphone is on.
It is true. I am also an operative, including now. The connivance between civil servants, I don't want to say just accounting officers, civil servants, has been a long tradition, and parliament, members of parliament. I remember...
Connivance or lobbying?
Connivance and lobbying. I remember the park, that time park of Honorable Tede Wamusi in NRSC, he's still alive. Honorable Nkalupa Waswa, he died. Honorable George Kochima Sadieba, who eventually became our Prime Minister. That park was very vibrant, and I remember back and forth civil servants buying their way to avoid strict accountability before park. I remember in the 6th Parliament or 7th, 3 MPs were locked up at Mukwano Industries down here in Kampala. They had gone to extort, and they pleaded. Eventually, through other interventions, the gate was opened and they left. All those MPs no longer exist in Parliament. The people who are interested in the research can go and check. They were very, very loud members of Parliament in that place. Then there was the question of chief administrative officers when the Parliament had just established the local government accounting committee, the park of the local governments, where cows would come and they would be harangued by members of Parliament in that committee. And members of Parliament would actually travel to districts to physically collect money from cows in the districts. So that process has not... For me, I think it is bigger than just these 3. I have written a column today and saying, because if you look at these 3 members of Parliament, they are not the most visible on the floor of Parliament or even in committees. My sister Namuju, I know she's a hustler. She has been a hustler for a long time. When Professor Bukenya was the minister for the presidency, that's where I first saw her. She's generally a hustler. My friend Paul Akamba, the MP for Busiki, you don't hear him on the floor of Parliament or in the committees. Mutembule Yusuf has been a DP candidate in Butareja there. And then last election she changed to NRM and won. You don't hear him much on the floor of Parliament. So how come that these silent, non-visible MPs,
they are making money,
are the ones that civil servants claim, or like in this case, none other than the chairperson of the Uganda Human Rights Commission, who has previously been Deputy Inspector General of Government. You can imagine that these MPs couldn't even know. Or perhaps they were naive or silly, that you go to a former Deputy Inspector General of Government and you ask her to give you 20% of the budget of her institution. How naive are you? So I suspect that these are simply part of front, but no, not scapegoat, fronts for a larger pack of hounds in that Parliament.
The last time Nanfuka used such words about parliamentarians, let me first caution you.
In the last Parliament.
First of all, let me caution about hounds. Please don't call MPs hounds. Last time she said, Nanfuka, last time I cautioned you about such a word. Please continue.
Yes. I have said on another platform, in the last Parliament, 10th Parliament, I am a sub-accounting officer. I went to appear before a committee, and the chairperson of that committee told me that I should accept and we put 6 billion on the media center vote.
Really?
And that, yes, 6 billion. And that we would share. And I said no. And this was a she. And I said, no, I can't do that. And I went and reported it.
So is that why your department is suffering?
Apparently, yes. This financial year which is ending, they have been paying me salary without operational money. You can imagine. But what the point I'm making is there is a lot of connivance. Look at committees. Committees arrange entities, particularly ministries and self-accounting bodies like parastatals. If not giving them direct money, they will hide it in retweets. Parliament has its money. They have committee meetings, and you ask, what are those things you can't discuss and conclude in the committee meetings that you want a retweet in Entebbe? Why do they want retweets? If you go to the retweet, you will see the chairperson of a committee for a retweet of 2-3 days. Because you would ask, why would a committee want a retweet of 3 days when you have been interfacing with these entities on the committees? In a retweet of 3 days, a chairperson is given 10 million. After his accommodation, now accommodation has been paid. They give them stipend. I'm telling you, they give them stipends. And then committee members and so on. Yes. Yes. These are facts. These are facts. And if they are supervising 3 parastatals which are related, they'll first have amalgamation of a retweet. Then individual agencies now again have another retweet, and that's the center of earning. And yet, I remember some time back, I think when the Honorable Right Honorable Kadaga was the speaker, she had actually said, please, ministries and agencies, don't fund my members of parliament because there is already a budget in the parliament. But it has not stopped. And because the accounting officers are using this as a scapegoat, that they are being pressured by members of parliament. But supposing you're an accounting officer and you refuse to fund the retweet, would a member of parliament or would a committee of parliament actually strangle you? I think it is simply they are simply slapping each other's back.
Okay. Let me squeeze
until we get the accounting officers on the rope, this will not stop.
Okay.
Because the money is not being released by members of parliament, it is being released by accounting officers. And accounting officers sometimes are also being pressured by their political supervisors, who are the ministers. Because some of the ministers are not prepared enough. When they go to a committee, they don't have plausible explanation for the policies they bring.
Thank you.
They find it easier to say, okay, chairperson, we shall arrange for your retweet. And doing that arrangement of the retweet,
so Abdu,
they pat each other on the back. And we must. I hope the president doesn't kuzima moto. He should actually tighten the noose. But the tightening of the noose must be on the ministers, permanent secretaries, before you go to parliament.
So, OO has put a lot of feeling in that submission. I just asked him to give a report as the ED of Uganda's spokesman, the boss of.
Well, he has been passionate about this, throughout. This is not about today. He's been consistent.
Yes. The only one he doesn't agree with is Sechikubo's signature seeking. But anything against Parliament, he. So, the first question I asked to him was to give a report on that. And he's kind of summarized with extra information. You as a parliamentarian, can you answer some of what he's saying? And 2, as a lawyer, the case seems a little bit weak for all the drama that came with it. And doesn't the theatrics of it all spoil, a good cause fighting corruption?
First of all, these are not the best of days to be a member of parliament. I must say so. But as OO says, maybe it's really wider than what we are talking about as parliament. I let the law take its own course. And our constitution is very clear. Everybody is presumed innocent until otherwise proved. So I don't want to be here to condemn people who have not yet gone through a legal process. Then I also thought that once a legal process has taken course,
started,
we need to let it go on as it should. The scenes of last evening at the court, first of all, they are not surprising. Security has always been doing this sort of thing. But to me, it shouldn't happen. Even if, because this gentleman went to police voluntarily. The police wrote to the speaker and demanded that these people report on Monday at 9, the three of them.
And they did.
And they did, on dot. They were detained and eventually produced in court within the stipulated number of hours, which was okay, and then the court process started. Did we need to have that sort of drama at the court? I think it was very, very...
They could have asked them again to come back, and they would have
even
come
if
back.
A policeman said, yes, you've been released, but please join us. We have some other question to ask. He would have just walked there like he walked to the police. The drama was really unnecessary. And sometimes, even if you have a good case, it spoils it. People will wonder what exactly is going on. As far as corruption is concerned, I mean, it is a cancer in this country. And if we can't show it, then we're in trouble. Because when you look at the record, whether of the IMF, of the World Bank, they tell you we lose close to maybe 3-4 trillion annually due to corruption. And the president this time has promised really to, as O say, to do the nose, strengthen the. Let's see how it goes.
Nafi, sometimes I say to Nafi, he has the same contradictions as Nafi. So he's been very strong, like you are very strong on parliamentarians and their corruption. But then he won't sign. He does not support the censure petition. He doesn't.
He got some excuses. I think he elucidated them, but still were not convinced.
But it's the same way with these people who have been arrested and all.
Oskar, it's like Abdu here says, it's a cancer. But then again, with something like corruption, you're not going to fight it like you're fighting rats in your home. There are ways of fighting corruption that don't involve all this drama. First, put systems in place. Second, put mechanisms of apprehending these people, arresting them.
Who says they are not there? We have very many anti-corruption. Okay.
Yes, implement the mechanisms you have in place.
You had nearly gotten me going in voice.
In countries like Singapore, it was a simple thing of, if you're a government officer and you have this posh house in Bukit there, to complete with the tarmac road of so many kilometers coming to your home, simply account for where you got from that money. If it's an inheritance or it's payment for your former employer who employed you as the house girl, then you list that. And if government is satisfied, they let you go on. But if you can't account for it, they repossess it, you go to jail. These people, with all this drama, you think anything is going to happen to them? If the president was serious, he would have started with the Mabati people. But here he is with half of his cabinet, thieves. Thieves on record.
No, one.
With evidence. One, who?
The Mabati is only one. The others are sacked and they're in court.
Yeah, Lugolov is still there as a minister.
That's one.
The prime minister is still there.
Not charged. But anyway,
the speaker is still there. What I'm saying is, if he was serious, and we all know, and the last 20-30 years have not shown anything that show that this man is serious about corruption. So Ugandans are not impressed or fooled.
Okay.
No.
Let's go to Derrick.
They will all get away with it. In fact, some of them, Namuju may come back as a minister for foreign affairs.
I don't know if it is allowed to make Capital Gang a comedy show.
Namfi. But I mean,
you've been reporting all these things.
Yeah.
And is this a taste for NRM to members to know what it feels like to be an opposition member? Because this kind of treatment is usually, special attributed to arresting members of your opposition.
Yeah, those certainly those sins come to me with nostalgia. I've covered such very, very intense sins where
nostalgia means you are fond of them
because they have been here. I've been just part of them. I've seen them. This is like the umpteenth time I'm seeing something like that. And they don't come by surprise. You saw with the Honorable Segiri Nyaz, you've seen son of police, Felix Kawesi, you've seen those suspects in the Muslim cleric killings and stuff. Many of these things have been happening, but like you put it, it has always been, I don't think it has always been, we've not seen it in people who are within the NRM, people who are within the NRM leadership, and this comes with a lot of fear for them. Probably, if it had happened to maybe the Honorable Kitutu or Honorable Nandutu last time when they were arraigned in court and rearrested, then would have said this is the first that's happening to ministers. But these are MPs from NRM. And like we've said, when the Mabati case came up, we said, yes, there is every evidence that the Mabati were mismanaged, but certainly there's going to be a very small spunk from courts or from president, but it's not going to be a thud or a hitting or a whipping that myself and Namfi expect, that you're going to then say these MPs should never show up in parliament anymore for the fact that they are in court. They should not show up in parliament and stuff like that. They are going to be there for 1 to 3 days, then they are going to be released, and then the most surprising is going to come when they are given ministerial positions. And I'm also having the same sentiments. So the fight of corruption in this country is still, the will to fight corruption in this is still very low. It's very, very low.
John Kakungulu Walugembe.
Correction.
We are out of time, so
no, you and Wandera here have made a claim that the NRM reserves, or the state reserves, this dramatic iris only for opposition. That's not true.
So you yourself have been on this program saying they shouldn't do that.
First of all, they shouldn't do that. They shouldn't, especially somebody who has been released by court, and more so, somebody who you summoned in the earlier case and reported themselves. There's no reason. Now, you remember, maybe it is because it's almost 20 years ago, the case of Honorable Jim Muhwezi of Agavi, where they took paraphernalia of the military to surround his home. So it is not the Kitutus. They also took the Kabangalis of police trucks to arrest them, and yet they could have summoned. So this, I think, is a bad way that the police uses to arrest people. I think there are, you only use that for somebody who's resisting, but somebody you summoned and reported themselves to court, even when the court gives them bail, you can still just serve them and they go back to police to record.
John,
so it is not necessary. It's necessary, and it is not reserved to opposition. They do.
I'm going to give Wandera an extra minute to make a list of the opposition vis-a-vis those examples you've given.
Okay. So my comment on corruption. Also, I think that generally speaking, our moral fiber has kind of degenerated, and that's not just for politicians. for politicians more so, because even us as the voters, we put them under a lot of pressure. Want them to pay our school fees, our children's this, our children's that. So where do we expect them to get the money? So they also have to get the money somewhere. So that's the. No, I'm not. I'm just telling you that if we must put them in the corner everywhere and say they are devils and all that. We must also understand the consequences of our actions. So the point being that we must strengthen the system to ensure that it's not taken advantage of. Because the president talked about a cartel, and this cartel has accounting officers, it has this. So are we saying all these are no? So for me, I think that as a country, we need to see how do we work on ourselves, on our moral fabric, to ensure that we do what's right for our country.
Prosper?
Yeah, I think on this point of corruption, the president has come out to speak very, very strongly against it, and calling the corrupt traitors and calling them, those, and vowing to crush them. I am really looking forward to seeing that put in action, because and the example he gave about him being a speaker and a chief justice while in the bush, and the group of soldiers, one Zabuloni, who went out to drink and shoot people, and when they came back, and there was a tribunal that was held for them at the High Command, and the lawyer in there, Jim, said that it was the alcohol in the man that shot the people. And when he, as the president, evaluated the scenario, he realized that in the interest of their agenda and what they wanted to do, they had to deal with it decisively, and the man was killed despite.
Despite the alcohol in the body.
Traditional Ugandan law. Because using the traditional Ugandan law. Traditional. How will we solve our problems traditionally? That was the example he gave.
You are quoting. Abdu was there.
In a way. Abdu was
he was there when the presentation was made in Parliament.
He was there.
He should have questioned the other one, not you.
On that. But what I got from that is he wants to crack the whip. He wants to turn up, the fight against corruption, and bring it to an end. So let us see it in action. Let them recover any lost assets that from the corrupt. Let's see this happening. Let there be a heightened risk to be corrupt. Let it become risky for people to be corrupt.
I promised Derrick an extra 2 minutes to respond to and then I'll give safe hands for closure of the program. It will be Abdu Kantuntu, because I'm looking across the table.
For me, quite avidly. And
by the way, I'm not so sure how I'm going to start introducing you. Is it from the paper of the cows or?
I'm a journalist. So
no, the president has given us a description of your newspaper.
The bad paper.
Yes, of the cows.
But OO knows it's not a bad paper anyway. I was very clear. I was very clear, and I gave examples of such scenarios. I gave when the Honorable Alan Sewanyana and the Honorable Segirinya were rearrested. I gave the scenario of the suspects of Kawesi killing. I gave the suspects of the Muslim clerics killings, and many of those that have been happening.
And I've seen how you have avoided mentioning Besije. So there are many other examples.
And many other examples. And I was very categorical. I said it has not been very common with people within NRM or even government that they are rearrested upon being given bail, and OO can give us maybe a name or two if it has ever happened.
Okay, Abdu.
It is not common, so that settles the matter.
He studied English.
Yes.
So, final word on the Capital Gang from Abdu Kantuntu. Do you believe that this time corruption is going to be tackled, as the president said?
I really don't know, but what is important is at least for the public to know that eventually, if you put your hand in the public till, there are consequences. But I also want everybody to know, of course, us as leaders, especially Parliament, we are being put at a higher test. Why? Because we are supposed to be the one protecting the people's interest. The parliamentary budget is 3% of the national budget, around there. If we look at what is going on in the 97%, where OO and others are, I think you'll find even worse than what we
So can you start
at.
looking there?
So I think eventually the government should look to where the 97% is. Two.
Okay. Thank you so much, the listeners of the Capital Gang. Uganda Matters University invites applicants for both undergraduate and postgraduate programs for the academic year 2024 to 2025. For postgraduate programs, one must have attained a bachelor's degree from a recognized university. For undergraduate programs, we welcome applicants with a minimum of 2 principal passes. We offer unique programs at their various campuses in Nkozi, Lubaga, Fort Portal, Masaka, Mbale, and Geta. You can visit them on their website or call Uganda Matters University in Nkozi, making a difference. Star Cafe, thank you very much. Our guests, Prosper and John, I saw they engaged. As usual, Derrick, Wandera.
With Star Cafe is that even when we are 10 gangsters, they bring only 1 flask. When we are 2, they bring 1 flask. They should increase the number of flasks.
They have had, but but when they bring 1 flask, then some of us decrease on the content. So thank you, Abdu, Kantuntu, Nanfuka, Derrick, Prosper, Ahabwe of Ernst and Young. I got it right this time. John Kakungulu, Walugembe.
You got Ngeta wrong. You said Ngeta. It is
Ngeta. Okay. Thank you very much. John Kakungulu, Walugembe, of Federation of Small, Medium-Sized Enterprises. Thank you so much. Abdu, can you send an Eid message here as a final? Because Eid is here.
Already. Tomorrow is Eid al-Adha. And I sent my good wishes to all the believers. Eid Mubarak.
And because of that Eid message, I sent this message from Robert Mawanda. I gave Abdul a message, but in the spirit of Eid, I shall not read it out loud. But he has seen the message. I am Oskar, Ssemweya, Musoke, and I shall see you next week.
With Uganda National Budget University in Nkosi.